Welcome to another episode of Preparing for the Unexpected. I'm your host, Alex Fullick, and as always, we like to talk about things related to disaster recovery, business continuity, security, resilience, COVID, anything that's relatable to those subjects and anything that helps you, your organization, or your community prepare, respond, and overcome adverse situations. If there's a topic you'd like us to talk about on the show or you'd like to be a guest, please feel free to reach out to me through LinkedIn. The link is in the video description down below. I am the only Alex Fullick on LinkedIn, so I'm really easy to find. So just reach out and we'll see about getting you on the show or finding someone else to come on the show and talk about what you want to talk about. Now, I've said that with every episode since July 2017 on Voice America, and every so often people take me up on that offer. Today, I have a guest who did exactly that. They reached out a few weeks ago on the subject of, and I want to make sure I get it right, how information security and business continuity are linked. So I'd like to welcome to the show, Willy Fabritius. Willy, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Alex, thank you very much for having me. Great honor.
Well, it was a pleasure. I know I said you reached out,
Yes.
with some ideas. Actually, you should see the email Willy sent me. All these topics. I went, oh my goodness, we could do about 20 different shows. But we settled on, excuse me, we settled on this one. Now, we've got listeners and viewers literally around the globe. Can you take a couple of minutes and tell us about yourself, what you do, and how you got into this industry?
Sure. Yeah, by now you may have noticed my deep Chicago accent, which is obviously a joke. So yes, I do live in Chicago for the last 21 years, but prior to that, 3 years in Johannesburg, South Africa, and prior to that, obviously, I'm from Germany. How did I get into this industry? Well, long story is something along the line. I studied computer science and obviously, programming. And then I realized that this is not my forte. This is not my, strong suit. So I somehow ended up running a local area network at a stamping facility in Germany. And subsequently, I was tasked to introduce and implement a quality management system to ISO 9001. And that brought me sooner or later into the third-party auditing business, auditing to various international standards, which brought me to South Africa. And I was auditing automotive industries, suppliers to the big three, suppliers to the German car manufacturers. But because of my educational background, I somehow came back to information security and started auditing in that domain. And I had the privilege to audit Fortune 10 companies. And that was really, really amazing because of the maturity of their systems, but also because of the unique challenges. And then I obviously learned about ISO 22301, the Business Continuity Management System standard, got qualified to that. And now for the last 1.5, nearly 2 years, I'm the global head for information security, privacy, and business continuity at BSI, the British Standard Institution.
And here you are now. That's
And
it. I remember.
now I'm here.
I remember now. Kate, is it Kate Field?
Yes, Kate Field is my
one of your colleagues, and I know she has an episode airing very shortly, which will actually air before this one. But that was it. You saw that she was on the show, and that's when you reached out.
Yes. So she is the global head for health and safety, which is obviously another very important component of organizational resilience.
Mm-hmm. Well, we're going to talk about information security and business continuity and how they're linked. And I'll tell you up front, I've worked with some information security professionals. And if any of them listen to this show, I know they're going to go, what? They're going to go crazy. But that's good.
Absolutely.
So let's start how these are linked. But first, why is information security important to organizations? And what is information security?
Yeah, I think sometimes it's important to say what something is not. So information security is not IT security. It's not computer security. Information security is really about the subject of protecting the information an organization has. Alex, you and I are exchanging information right now. The question is, should we exchange that? Is that, suitable for public consumption, or should it be somehow protected? And many organizations have the thinking that information security is exclusive to IT security. Mm-hmm. Don't get me wrong. As I said earlier, my background is computer science, right? So yes, IT security is a crucial component of information security. But when you think about all those social engineering hacks, where people are getting some kind of interesting email, and they click the link, and the next thing they know, their computer is infected. Well, is this IT security, or is it person security? Mm-hmm. And that's the reason why I say no. It's really both, and people need to understand. So it's information security is about the protection of information under your control.
Well, I think it's been said now. I know there's a quote about this, but something along the lines of data, I wrote it down, data is the new currency. So information security is protecting that data, right?
Absolutely. And when you think about all those hacks we hear about, companies losing 500 million records of their users. Companies are losing 120 million records of their passengers. What is that? Are the people really interested in knowing your name now? Are they really interested in knowing that you flew from Heathrow to Charles de Gaulle? No, of course not. There's something else in that data they are interested in. And that is the thing that the organizations need to protect.
So why is information security so important then? Because there's something along the lines of, what's the acronym? CIA. And I don't mean the Central Intelligence Agency.
No, and it also does not stand for the Culinary Institute of America.
Oh, that's it, yes.
No, CIA in our world stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the confidentiality aspect I mentioned already earlier when Alex and Willy are talking. But then there's also the integrity question. And many organizations are really challenged with that question in terms of how do we know that the data has not been manipulated? So if I'm a hacker, am I interested in just stealing the information and use it for something else? That's one aspect, right? But if I really want to drive havoc, if I really want to create distrust into an organization, I would manipulate the data. So just envision you go to an ATM and withdraw money. What is the first thing you do? Check the balance, right? I mean, just out of curiosity, did I get my salary? And let's say all of a sudden you see there 900,000. Whether it's Canadian dollars or US dollars, it's something like, wow, that's pretty cool. But the next thing would be, why do I have so much money on my checking account?
Yeah, that's wrong.
There's something suspicious, right? But now imagine the opposite. It says minus 10,000. Mm. And you would get a heart attack. What happened, right? At the end, the effect will be that people don't trust the bank. That's the integrity issue, right? Or think about patient data in a hospital. You go there because you have some kind of back pain argument saying, and the doctor comes and says, well, I have bad news and good news. Your heart is pretty darn good, but we still need to have a stent inserted. Just hold on. Heart, back doesn't make sense. Well, are you not Mr. Bob Brown? No, I'm Alex, right? And all of a sudden, you would say, just hold on. Why does the doctor think that I'm Bob? And by the way, why he is sharing with me, Alex, Bob's condition?
Yeah.
You would be more than nervous, I guess.
Is
But
that what
then,
organizations have to do internally as well?
oh yeah,
Because
absolutely.
I remember working with, excuse me, some of these security and mainframe security people, creating rack FIDs and all that kind of stuff. And they would have this questionnaire: what are people allowed to look at, even within their own organization?
Access
You know,
control,
if
absolutely.
you're, yeah, if you're an analyst, you only get to look at this. If you're a different position, you get more data to look at and able to do
Yes,
something. So is that something that you also have to look at internally as well?
absolutely. The biggest threat, unfortunately, is still from the inside of an organization. And I describe that as the current disgruntled employee. In other words, the
Yeah.
employee who has mentally already terminated his engagement.
Yeah, they
Didn't resign yet, officially. Mentally, that person resigned. And that is the biggest threat to an organization, because that person still has access. And yes, there are obviously access control mechanisms. Banks on a regular basis require their employees to take vacation, so that somebody will take over their job temporarily to make sure that there is no irregularity. We at BSI have access control mechanisms. Despite my global level, I cannot access reports from all the countries. I only can access reports from certain countries. If I want a report from particular countries, I need to request access. I need to have justification. If I just say I want it, access denied. If I have good business justification, it goes up to the chain, to the owner of the data, that then says, yeah, Willy, in this particular case, can indeed access that information. And so access control is absolutely paramount.
I guess that's been around for quite some time, because maybe you remember the days before you go into a bank and you're trying to work with the teller and they get frustrated. Hang on, I got to go find a supervisor to override this with the code. And I guess it's that kind of a thing, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you obviously also know the thing that age limitations at registrars for buying alcohol, depending on the country, it might be 21 or whatever. Supervisor is required. Why? Because certain people cannot do certain things. And that's the same when you go to a bank and want to withdraw $10,000 in cash. Well, that's not a problem in itself, but it still needs to be reviewed and approved by a secondary person. And the same is obviously true with access to health records, access to, I don't know, transactions related to purchasing activities and things like that, right?
Right. But it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's a bad person because
No.
they need someone to come and override something. It means you've been given the access you need to perform your duties. And sometimes if you're pushing against that wall, you need someone just to let you in for a minute, or allow you to do something. And
There
then
is,
you go
right.
back and now you're out again.
And there's the concept of need to know, right? So why would that person need to know something about, I don't know, an activity in Japan when that person is located in Toronto? That might be a good business reason. And if that needs to be done every single second, well, that person will get access continuously. But if it is only occasionally, once per quarter, it is better to have a secondary review taking place. Absolutely.
Right. So how often do these information security incidents occur to organizations? That's a
Oh,
loaded
well,
question, I know.
that's a loaded question. Well, so when I go back to my auditor's time, which is a couple of years ago, there was one organization telling me it pretty much happens about 15 to 20,000 times a second.
Wow.
Think about that. I mean, at first you say, yeah, 15 to 20 times per year. No, 1,000, okay, okay, per second. Wow. So now the question is, what is an incident, right? An incident is not necessarily a breach. An incident is not necessarily something that is totally bad. But an incident is a deviation from the norm, a deviation from something that is normal. And good organizations have fantastic detection mechanisms in place to alert them, because as you have heard, if you don't know it, you don't react. If you don't measure, you don't know, right? And that's the fundamental premise of information security. You really need to have measurement systems, detection mechanisms in place to alert you. Not every incident is a bad thing, but every incident could lead to disasters. And that's something to think about, right? I mean, for example, go to your email inbox. How many spam emails do you get per day? You could argue that each of those is an incident. But because your system alerts you and you are well trained, you're not clicking on the link. Okay, you prevented that. But the fact that you got a spam email could be interpreted as an incident.
It's like 1,000 a second. One of those got through.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. How many people in a 100,000 employee company does it take to click, right?
Well, I worked at a client before COVID, or just at the beginning of COVID. And what they had implemented is, they would send out an email to their staff disguising it as an external partner of some sort, saying, hey, we've got all kinds of things. Hey, Alex. Sometimes it went to the actual person, and they added a button to their email application that says, you'll report this as spam, and I know someone who did click on a link and they got a big letters, showing up in their email. You need to, I forget the exact wording, but basically, naughty boy, you weren't supposed to click that link.
Yeah, we had a couple of years back an internal training session, and on day 2, the tutor said something along the line, so so-and-so and so-and-so, I recognize you are not following the dress code policy. And the 2 people said, excuse me, what are you talking about? Well, I know that you clicked on the link last night. And that was also an internal test email that said, heads up kind of thing for internal events, a new dress policy. If you want to know more details, read here. And then those 2 people also forwarded it to some other colleagues as well, just to make sure. And on one hand, it's sort of kind of embarrassing. On the other hand, it tells me that all of us are not immune to that. If it's really written very, very well, I mean, Alex, let's face it. If you get tomorrow an email from Willy Fabritius at vsigroup.com saying, hey, Alex, just came about this wonderful article in this and this kind of magazine touching on business continuity, hyperlink. What is the probability that you click that?
Because you and I just talked, the probability of me doing that goes up.
Yes, exactly.
Most definitely goes up.
Because A, you are interested. A, we just met. I think I'm trustworthy. Right? And all of a sudden, all those components raise the risk. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it's very, very important that organizations really challenge their employees in really being on the alert. I mean, you mentioned earlier in the intro, COVID-19. Believe it or not, many spam emails are titled something along the line, great news from HR department concerning COVID.
That's right. Yeah. And we did get ones like that. So it wouldn't be a shock to get one somewhere down the line that reads the same way. It's like, oh, here's an update. Click right off.
Yes. And the next thing you know, your computer says,
you've got the blue screen of death, as we used to say.
Well, the real bad things are actually not immediately visible. The bad things are really then happen in the background where they then infect other computers.
Yeah.
And that's the real bad thing.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our first segment. We are talking with Willy Fabritius today on how information security and business continuity are linked. And we're going to be touching on the business continuity part in our second segment. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. We are talking with Willy Fabritius today on how information security and business continuity are linked. Willy, great first segment, lots of good information there. Now let's move into how do we incorporate things like supply chain management and business continuity activities into, or with, I shouldn't say into because I don't want anyone to get upset, with information security?
Alex, that's a very good question. When we think about a modern organization, there is not a single organization that can exist without suppliers. Whether you are manufacturing a gadget, you will need components, or whether you are a cloud provider, you need internet connectivity. If you are a service organization, you need IT infrastructure, right? So we all need suppliers, and we are exchanging information. We are exchanging data with the suppliers, and we rely upon them, those suppliers, processing the information correctly. And obviously, if now one of those suppliers, God forbid, several of those suppliers are not able to process the information in a timely, correct manner, then we are affected. Just think about, you are shipping some kind of products. And as a good customer-focused organization, you obviously allow your customers to track the packages on UPS, FedEx, whatever you're using. Now, just imagine that interface between computer system and transportation service provider is not working for whatever reason. How many calls do you get? Where's my package? And that is just an example, right? So, and modern applications running on an iPhone or whatever phone you have are relying upon so many different other providers that are working in the background. At a research conference recently, a researcher told me that he analyzed a particular application and it used 120 different websites.
Wow.
Think about that. So if you have your app, whatever that might be, banking app or travel booking app, and you see only the surface, right? But in reality, it's communicating to up to 120 or even more different websites in the background. What happens if those are down? Your business is down. So information security is business continuity. Business continuity is information security. Those two are linked. And when you look at international standards, when you look at ISO 27001, it's talking about business continuity. And if you look at the business continuity standard, the ISO 22301, what a surprise! It's talking about information security. Mm-hmm. So those international standards have recognized that those things are actually totally intertwined.
Well, I remember when we had I worked for a team, half of us were business continuity, the other half were information security. When there were incidents, if there was a denial of service attack or something like that, the information security team had their own protocol to respond. Business continuity was left out. If there was a different kind of incident, facility-based or something that impacted the business, which everything does anyway, because then we were involved and security wasn't there. So in today's world, if anything happens, how do you propose organizations should respond?
Multidisciplinary approach. That's the only way to get it done. Look, in our world, we are super specialized. Even within the IT organization, you have people that are not just responsible for the network, they're responsible for the router setup, right? And on one hand, that's fantastic, it's absolutely crucial. But when it comes to disaster recovery, when it comes to incident management, no, you need to have a multidisciplinary approach. Otherwise, you're not able to manage it. You need people from finance, as well as the legal department, as well as the BCM professionals, as well as the InfoSec professionals. Otherwise, it's not going to happen.
I've always taken the approach or thought of the approach, get everyone key at the table and let them decide whether they need to be an active participant or just an FYI person on the sidelines or not.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the bigger that team, that's the right approach, because people are listening, right? And they hear one keyword and they say, just hold on, excuse me for interrupting, but that is where I need to jump in.
Yeah.
And that's cool.
Yeah, that's my area. You only mentioned it once and you quickly glossed over it, but that's my area. How does that impact me? What do I need to do?
Right.
So how do you go about pulling that together? If you do have a big information security breach, data breach of some sort, how do you go about pulling that kind of a response together? And how quick should your response be?
The last question is the easy one. Now, immediately. And believe it or not, I think that thinking about COVID-19, it actually might have a benefit, because now really everybody is used to Zoom and Teams and all those, modern communication methods we have. In the past, it was something like, oh, we've got a problem. Let's call a meeting tomorrow morning in the boardroom. Well, by tomorrow morning, the company may not exist any longer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now it's something like, okay, bridge call. Get everybody on the phone who needs to be there, whether that person in Singapore, in Australia, or in Germany, or in Toronto, it doesn't matter. We are all hyper connected. And from that point of view, I think it's actually one of the better lessons of COVID, that we really know the technology is reliable and we can trust it and work on with it. So multidisciplinary approach, immediate reaction, get as many people involved as possible.
What are some of the activities that may get implemented or considered as a result of some sort of a breach? You've got all these people at the table, people have to be doing something. If I'm in finance, I can't just sit there, oh, my system's not working, and just sit there. Well, I'll just wait for 4 hours. It's like, no, what should I be doing? What kind of things should be happening? It's not just I'm assuming it's just not the network and information security people who are scrambling around, but other people have to do things too, right? So how does an organization really respond? How should they respond?
Well, the question would be, who is really impacted by this situation? So in your example, the finance folks, who are really their customers? Well, among others, suppliers who need to get paid, but also the customers who should pay the organization, right? So depending upon whether it's inbound or outbound finance, the question would be, should they perhaps inform their business partners? If it is really just 4 hours, most likely nobody outside the organization even realizes it. But if it's longer than that, the question would be, who are our partners, business partners, we must inform and get in contact with? And that is obviously, the individual process owner who needs to make that decision. Whether this is the HR department talking to a temp agency that, in the next 3 days, they don't need any temps despite the planning, or the other way around, they need more temps despite not saying we need any, right? So the question is, what is the impact of that incident to the outside world if we communicate it properly? And obviously internal questions. But Alex, frankly speaking, I think the post-mortem analysis, the analysis after the incident, is equally important, if not more important. So there's definitely the survival situation, right? How can you survive the next couple of hours or days? But once it's all over and business back to usual, the question would be, what are the lessons learned? Why did that person click on that email? Why did that laptop actually now infect 50 other laptops. Why was a laptop in the customer service department able to infect a laptop in the HR department? Why?
They're not supposed to be
connected. I mean, they are on the same LAN, but they are using different applications. There should be VLANs, there should be segregation of networks, and so on and so forth, right? And that is the real question that should be asked. And I think this is where the majority of companies are extremely challenged.
But shouldn't those lessons learned or post-incident reviews or critical incident reviews, after action reports, there's different names, different methodologies used, they don't really mean anything unless something changes.
Correct.
Unless there's action put to it, right? Do you find that sometimes gets forgotten? You go through this whole exercise, but then nothing happens.
Many companies have great ideas, but the execution is lacking.
Yes.
And it's sad to say that, but yes, as you know, as an auditor, I unfortunately have seen multiple times that the after action report or the post-mortem analysis was just fantastic. I mean, school book precision, right? Something you would teach at university about how to. And then I say, so show me. Oh yeah, we decided it's too expensive. Sorry, you lost me, right? I mean, you do all that good work, you come to the conclusion that is the right thing to do, and then you are deciding it's not done because of funds. And that raises the question of management commitment. I'm sorry to say,
Well, then you've opened yourself up to the same incident again, which will occur. And now if you're using the ITIL methodology, if my memory is correct here, you're no longer in incident management. You've got to move into problem management because you've got a bigger problem. You've got the same incidents reoccurring and nothing changing, nothing happening, nobody learning.
Referring to ITIL, you could argue, well, at least now we have a process to fix the issue.
Yeah.
In the short term. How often have you heard from the IT folks, did you reboot the machine? A, I did. B, why do you think that rebooting actually solves the issue? I mean,
yeah, I remember that. Still get that as a response. Did you reboot? Reboot? I never heard of doing that. You can't help but sometimes, and I feel bad for saying this to some poor help desk person, but it's like, come on, it's somebody forcing you to say that because we did that. But I guess there are people that don't think that. They fiddle around with something and they make it worse.
Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, that is the case.
So with incidents then, what happens if it is taking longer than normal and you've done your communications, to internal and external partners, but a day's gone by? Now what do you do? Because you've got to start changing the way you're communicating and how frequently. What do you have suggestions in that respect? Because you've got to tell partners, don't send us anything now, where you might have been able to queue it up before. Internal people may have been told, I can't send Willy reports, don't send him anything, but you can still create them. Now you've got to change it, don't create them because the backlog is causing a new issue. So how do you manage those kind of situations?
Well, I think it goes back to risk assessment and business impact analysis, right? A good business impact analysis review should address what happens if that system is not available for a day, for a week, for a month, and then take the appropriate actions. And I do understand that on a regular basis, those plans cannot be executed as planned because the situation is different, right? I mean, a year ago, if you had a pandemic plan, I'm pretty sure you did not consider, COVID and a Suez Canal blockage and internet connectivity is down, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, no chips from any chip factories in Taiwan. on top of that. So what I'm trying to say is flexibility is crucial, but at the same time, you need to have a plan. And you need to understand that the plan will be changed and will need to be changed. And a business impact analysis plan will have indeed those stages, short term, a couple of hours, maybe a day or two, over the weekend, a week, a month, a quarter. And yes, that may mean that you need to shut down in a particular country. This may mean that you need to transfer your IT infrastructure to another provider, but you need to think about those possibilities and take the appropriate actions.
And on that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We are talking with Willy Fabritius today on how information security and business continuity are linked. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Today, we are talking with Willy Fabritius about information security and business continuity and how they're linked. Willy, in our last segment, I want to talk about what organizations can do to protect themselves, what kind of practices they should have in place. We've mentioned standards at one point, but in my opinion, standards are usually the minimum an organization needs or to address whatever that standard is, business continuity, information security, supply chain management, whatever, is the minimum. Now, to your point, you're saying that there's thousands of attacks, happening on one organization on a daily basis. So if standards only provide us the basic minimum to meet that standard, and we've got government agencies, unfortunately, we've got hackers, we've got organized crime syndicates that have upped their game in these nefarious activities that they've been doing. What can organizations and what should organizations do to up their game to combat what's happening on the other side, especially when a standard is only giving them the minimum?
Good question indeed. And I hear what you say, but I do not necessarily agree, because management system standards, ISO standards, are on a regular basis written in such a way that they are adaptable and must be adapted to an organization's environment. So for example, when you think about information security management system standard ISO 27001, it says that you need to identify the context in which you operate, and you need to identify the risks the organization. Depending upon the risk identified, you come up with suitable controls to mitigate those risks. Well, that's a minimum, no question about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what kind of countermeasures do you implement? The standard doesn't necessarily say. So that could be user access control. Okay. This could be antivirus software. Okay. It could be actively pen testing your system. Whatever is state of the art could be a solution to mitigate the risks identified. And I would like to emphasize, management systems always include that one requirement that says, and I paraphrase, the organization shall continually improve their system.
Mm.
So if you tell me, last year we did this and this year we do exactly the same, that would be not fulfilling the requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Because you didn't improve, right?
Yeah, you're in the same place you were last year. You move forward.
And that brings me to the thing in terms of measurement. You need to measure the effectiveness of your system. And if you recognize that your system is not fulfilling the objectives, you fail in your mission. And if you fail in your mission, you need to review and need to update. And then we are not talking about improvement. Now we are talking about corrections.
So how do you measure? Before we go to the corrections part, how do you measure?
It's a good question, because there is not a single answer to that. But I would like to suggest that when you go back to high school physics, you have heard about the electromagnetic field and the three directions, right? Well, in business, you can argue that every single process, every single control can be measured in 3 different dimensions. Time, how fast are we doing something? How long does it take us to do something? So in business continuity, how fast are we able to detect the issue? How fast are we able to recover, right? And then there is something like quality. How good was the solution? Was it just a patch? Or was it actually addressing the fundamental issue so that it's not reoccurring again?
Mm-hmm.
And sorry to say, there's also cost. And yes, all those 3 dimensions, time, quality, and cost of a process should be measured. So let's make that example of that phishing test email to employees. How fast are people reacting to it? How many people are reacting? How many people are actually reporting it to IT or HR rather than clicking? Then we train people. How effective is that training? In other words, next year round, how many people are now reacting in the right, proper way? And yes, how much did it cost us? No question about that, right? But I would really like to emphasize that while every process can be measured against those 3 dimensions, it's not necessarily the best approach. So when you buy a new mouse for your computer, what is more important? Whether it's $5 or $15, or that it is ergonomically correct and doesn't hurt your hand. That's the quality component, right? And in InfoSec on business continuity, it's the same. Sometimes price is not the issue, but quality is the important thing. And sometimes price is the issue because, well, you just simply don't have this $3.8 million sitting around for some kind of firewall.
So if I'm, let's say, I'm in the organization and I've got my baseline, we did what we did last year. We've had all these incidents. What should I expect a year later, to your point, about moving forward? Where should I be? What should I have done? What kind of corrections should I have in place, to say that, hey, this is what we've done. This is how we've come this far, which means that we have now been able to address A, B, C, D, E, F. What kind of things should I be looking at, implementing, and not just sending an email to staff.
Yes, sometimes it's not the obvious. So if I start in an organization auditing them, and they say we have last month we had 10 incidences, I say okay, and coming back a year later they say, well, this year's bad, we had 1,200 incidences. My first reaction would be, what did you change? And they say, well, we implemented an intrusion detection system. Excellent, because now you have a more sophisticated system to alert you. You obviously get more positive results, which might be a little bit which might be misleading, right? I mean, you go from 10 incidences to 1,200 incidences, whatever time unit, sounds bad, right? But that could be the result of something very positive, implementing a detection system. So in other words, it really depends upon where the organization is weak. If the organization is weak in patch management, well, they should do something about patch management. If they are still running Windows 7, maybe they should think a little bit about their, investment policies. If they have challenges with supply chain, they should address the supply chain. I would like to encourage organizations not to go too much, because at the end of the day, regardless of the size of the problem, you need to break it down in smaller issues that can be handled. So think about the 3 biggest issues the organization has with regard to BCM, respectively InfoSec, and address those. And once those have been addressed, go to the next 3 ones, right? And that over time will improve the posture of the organization.
Because as you move to the next 3, you're also hopefully still improving on those first 3. So now you're in a way you've got 6 things moving, but 3 are the key priorities, and 3 are now better monitored, so to speak.
Yeah, and they may be on autopilot for improvement.
Yeah. And I like your example about the 1,200, incidents, when you used to have 10. Well, that'll give you consideration thought going, does that mean we had 1,190 incidents we don't know about? Right?
Yes, yes.
So yeah, that can be a good thing. We've only got 2 minutes left, believe it or not. Can you take a minute and a half with any final thoughts you want to convey?
Yeah, I think that we all have a responsibility with regard to information security, whether this is for ourselves, for our companies we are working for, or even for the larger society. As you alluded to earlier, information security is national security. And I only can concur with that. At the end of the day, you might think that you are just a small little fish, but you might be actually the entry point to a bigger fish. Yeah. And that might be the issue.
To your point about the supply chain with all these different groups, right? Somebody way out there, that's your entry point, and you could be that entry point.
I told my customers in the DC area, you are not the target. Trust me. You are just a 50-employee company. Nobody cares about your payroll. But you are the entry point, the conduit to the big fishes. And that's what they are after.
That's interesting. Yeah, I bet you a lot of people don't look at it that way.
Yes,
I'm sure.
But the good thing is, with the DoD, the Department of Defense in the US, pushing the CMMC cybersecurity framework, it gets the attention that it needs. And many organizations are recognizing that they are part of the bigger system, and they are part of it's part of their, let's say, social responsibility to protect not just themselves but also their customers and maybe even the country.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we're all a cog in a big wheel. It's like a bike. You take out enough of those small spokes, and the wheel collapses.
Exactly.
Right. Willy, thanks very much for sharing your expertise and time. I really appreciate it. And thanks for reaching out. I really like the fact that, you were watching the show and noticing and decided to reach out and come on and talk about information security and business continuity and how they're linked.
Alex, thank you very much for having me. It was a great pleasure talking to you. And I hope the listeners of your show got something out of this, and looking forward speaking to you in the future, I hope.
Oh, well, when COVID is over, I hope to be able to travel again and run into people and say, hey, there you are for real. So thanks very much for your time. Again, I really appreciate it. And everybody who's watching and listening, stay prepared, everybody. If you liked that video, thumbs up. If you didn't like that video, thumbs down. But leave a message and let me know what your thoughts are. If you'd like to be a guest on the show to talk about something related to business continuity, disaster management, COVID, personal well-being, anything that's relatable to those subjects, you can reach me through my LinkedIn profile, which is in the video description. And of course, don't forget to subscribe. In the meantime, stay prepared, everybody.